Ready when you ready when you are, folks. I thought I was ready. Anytime. The second time this semester, at least, that I have to start with an apology. Sorry about last week, but there was just no way. I won't bother with you with the details. Actually, what I should do is tell you this funny one-liner. On 60 Minutes Sunday night, they did a bit on the show. Maybe some of you folks have seen it. I'd never heard of it. Something Gear? What is it?
Top Gear.
Top Gear? Where they smash trucks and race cars and do stuff? Yeah, it's Top Gear. 350 million people watch it every week. I had never heard of it. But anyway, they were talking to the director, and he was explaining his idea for the show. And he said, basically, our idea is just to dig into the male mind. And I just thought it would be a pretty humorous topic. Because, as we all know, after all, nothing ever happens there. Not bad. Sort of insulting, but not bad. Okay, we're finally to Descartes. So let me remind you, just for the record, of the relationship between this and the things the two topics we talked about before. We started out with a question about the possibility of rational belief about the supernatural. And then we talked about Hume's looking into the question of how we know things about the natural world that we haven't personally seen. And now we're going to see with Descartes that in the end, what he's asking about is whether we even know there is a world. That is, say, you and I each individually. That question gets raised at the end of the first meditation, which is where we are. Why that question comes up is the whole story of the first meditation, so you'll just have to wait and see how that happens. But the explanation that Descartes gives you of why the meditations are being written, what kicked off the project, what made him decide he had to do it, was this experience that he had. And I know you've heard some of this before, but it's just as well right now to repeat it. It's pretty brief. He had discovered that he had held some false beliefs most of his life. He doesn't tell us what they were, but he was raised by Jesuits who had their own sort of Aristotelian kind of science in mind, no doubt. Most of them did. And probably it was some kind of quasi-scientific, theological kind of thing. In any case, pretty basic. That things that he had thought were pretty much nailed down, about as certain as anything that he knew, but he discovered that 2 or 3 of them, whatever, he doesn't even tell us how many, they were wrong. He just was mistaken. And so, since he is Descartes, this rattles around in his head, and he gets very disturbed because he realizes that he has no guarantee that this experience isn't going to happen again. Right? That is, he's corrected some mistakes, but he didn't see them coming. How does he know that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, he isn't going to change his mind about something else? And the reason that that's disturbing, if it's anything like the stuff that he changed his mind about in the first round, the things that he had figured out were false were pretty basic in his way of thinking about the world, and specifically about science and trying to understand the world. And so a lot of his work had been based on this stuff. Right? And if you're basing your work, your scientific work, on false assumptions, then God only knows how many other false things are scattered through there, so that all of your beliefs are now thrown into question. And if you just sort of plunge ahead anyway, since you think you've spotted the mistakes, you run this risk that you're going to have to change your mind again and again and again. And so in effect, you might spend your life spinning your wheels and not actually making any real progress in achieving knowledge of the world. So the situation Descartes finds himself in is, A, he's discovered these errors. B, as a result, he thinks that practically anything he believes might be mistaken because it was based on those mistaken ideas. And so now all of his beliefs, at least all of his scientific beliefs, are just up for grabs. It's just sort of chaos. Right? It's nice to think he's spotted a couple of the mistakes, but he may be carrying around a head full of mistakes. And so he's got to do something about this. And that's what the meditations are. They are an attempt to start over again, somehow start from scratch, and to do science in a way that will guarantee him that he will never have to go back and say, oh my God, my last 10 years' work is down the drain, I've got to start over again. Right? The idea is to prevent that from ever happening again. Okay, so he's got this very ambitious project in mind, and he's going to be very, very careful in all the steps he takes trying to correct the situation. He doesn't want to make any mistakes in the process of trying to clear up the mistakes, or the possible mistakes that he's already got. So he tells you within a paragraph here that in carrying out this project, he is going to not let himself rely on, and I'll actually find the words for you here in a second. He's not going to let himself assume anything or rely on anything that he could possibly be mistaken about. Here it's a sentence that he says, reason now leads me to think that I should hold back my assent. I should not be willing to believe opinions that are not completely certain and indubitable. I can't assume anything, rely on anything that isn't guaranteed to be true, because if I do, I just run more risks of running into more errors. So I quote that because I'm going to give Descartes a hard time about a couple of things that happen here, partly because they're just good things for you to try thinking your way through, partly because he deserves to have them pointed out. But let me say this in defense of what happens in the first meditation. I have come to think, actually I've thought this now for quite a while, that Descartes in this first meditation is engaged in something fairly interesting. He's trying to get his readers hooked on the problem that he wants to work on. He's trying to suck us in so that we see why he feels the problem, why the problem's there, and why he needs to fix it, and so that in a way why it's sensible to go about it the way he does. So I don't think he's being as careful as he would have been if he were writing something where he's just sort of laying out a treatise and all the truth is out there. It's a special place. So when I'm pointing out things that he seems to be missing, I don't think that he was fooled. I mean, I don't think I'm pointing out things that he was not aware of. But there are a couple of things that he slides under the rug, and it's worth noticing them. In fact, I already very quickly and sort of crudely described the first puzzle that Descartes is already in. And so I'll try describing it again. You see, this is just how he describes the situation that he finds himself in. See whether this strikes you as funny in any way. Descartes claims to have identified, let's say 3, just to pick a number at random. 3 things, basic things that he used to believe, which he's discovered were false. The result of that discovery is that all of his beliefs that are relevant to his project, to science, all of them, are now questionable because they were resting on these false beliefs that he used to have. Right? So literally, all of his beliefs are now maybe mistaken. Right? So he's got to somehow start from scratch. So I'll leave off the last comment and run the first 2 by you again. A, he's discovered that 3 of his beliefs, let's call them A, B, and C, right, were false. The result is that now all of his beliefs are questionable. Any one of them might be false. Anybody see any problem with that pair of sentences?
Since he believes they're false, then it has to be false that he believes that they're false.
It has to be false that he believes that they're false? No. It's interesting you bring that up because I'm going to point out in a couple of minutes. One of the things, when he's talking about beliefs that are false, mostly all the time when he's talking about beliefs, he's talking about beliefs about the world, about reality, outside of his own mind. But in particular, as you'll see, the second meditation, Descartes doesn't think that he could possibly be wrong about the contents of his own mind. He knows what he believes. Right? The things he believes might be false, but he knows what he believes. He knows what he wants. He knows a bunch of stuff about his own mind. But there's a problem, okay? These 3 beliefs are false that he used to hold, but also, and as a result, all of his beliefs might be false. Any one of his beliefs might be false.
His belief about how inductive reasoning could have been called into question, which would throw out him saying that all of his other beliefs could be false.
I don't think he's talking about inductive reasoning here, but try that again.
If he's saying, I have A, B, and C that are wrong,
right,
and I have, let's say, 1,000 things that I believe, if one of those things that he believes is that you can take the specific A, B, and C and make a generalization for the whole, that belief in itself could be wrong. And then even asking the question about whether those other 997 things are wrong or right is wrong in itself.
Well, fortunately, he's not, I think, making an inference about that. He's just, the idea is just that since he knows he's held false beliefs, and that these particular beliefs are ones he's relied on in arriving at other beliefs, there's a danger that they've been infected, so to speak, right? That's all. It's just the possibility that they're mistaken. But that's enough to drive him crazy. I mean, he can't rely on beliefs that might be mistaken at this point because mistaken beliefs don't get you anywhere. You need to know somehow that you're starting from 24 karat pure gold truth. And so, I should ask it one more time just in case somebody wants. There's, let me try just with a little more emphasis. A, B, and C are false. Right, that's one thing. Second, any belief I've got might be false.
The belief that A, B, C are false.
There you go, right. How about the belief that A and B and C are false? Right? I mean, A and B and C are scientific beliefs like that. he can't do this, right? He can't say, look, there's one thing I'm dead certain of, namely that A, B, and C are false. And here's something else that I'm dead certain of, namely all of my beliefs could be false. You can't have it both ways, right? That A, B, and C are definitely false, but they might not be false. So it's a trap. Yeah.
Just for clarity, is that what he's actually claiming, that's his actual statement, that A, B, and C are false,
Right.
and because they are false, then everything may be false?
Well, sure. I mean, as it goes.
That's the conclusion when he's come up with it.
Right. Well, yeah. That's why you'll see as the project takes on this project, he has to re-examine all of his beliefs. The whole body of beliefs has got to be re-examined because they're all subject to the possibility of this rot. Okay, so he can't do that. But to be kind to Descartes, there's a way he could have done this. Just put this in a parenthesis, right? I mean, this is just me talking about what Descartes could have done, and it's connected to this thing I said to the first question over here. Descartes could have proven to himself everything he needs to prove here, because he thinks that he knows what he believes, right? When he looks inside his own mind, he knows what he believes. Whether it's true or not, it's a different question, but he knows he believes it, right? So, obviously, at the beginning of the Meditations, he believes that he's changed his mind about some things, namely A, B, and C. Right? He used to think they were true, now he thinks they're false. Right? So he knows that. Right? Actually, I've never written it down before, but maybe I should. It's not that big a deal, but it's kind of neat. I believe I've changed my mind. Okay. So he's got this belief that he's changed his mind. Suppose that this belief is false, right? That he hasn't changed his mind. Oh, it's either true or false, one or the other, right? He's either changed his mind or he hasn't. Well, if it's false, then he knows he's believed at least one false thing. Right? Of course, he thinks it's true, but suppose it's true. Right? That is the belief that he's changed his mind is true. Well, then there's some things, namely A, B, and C, that he used to think were true, and now he thinks they're false. And either he was wrong the first time or he's wrong the second time. Right? Either he was wrong before he changed his mind or he was wrong after he changed his mind, right? So he can prove to himself, just using his knowledge of what he believes, that he has made mistakes somewhere along the line. Either he's making a mistake right now, thinking that he's changed his mind. Maybe he never did change his mind. Maybe that's just some massive hallucination he's having, right? That's one possibility. Right? But if it's true, right, then he can prove to himself that he has in fact held a false belief, namely either before he changed his mind about A, B, and C, or after he changed his mind about A, B, and C, right? So if it's true, then he's held a false belief, and if it's false, then he holds a false belief right now. So he could have done it, but that would have been tedious, right? I mean, this is what philosophy professors do. Descartes just trying to get us hooked in here, and he's being a little bit casual. But okay, so he's got to re-examine all of his beliefs. And what he wants to achieve, actually, I didn't get the actual language that's in your translation. What he wants to achieve is stable beliefs that are likely to last. Actually, there's another translation I like a lot better. What he's after is a firm and permanent structure in the sciences. But the idea is that he wants to start over again so he can achieve something that's just going to last, right? And he's never going to have to go back and reconstruct and tear down and start over again. So the question is, how does he go about doing that? And what he thinks he has to do is to refuse to allow himself, first of all, to believe anything that isn't something that is absolutely certain and indubitable. Right? He has to just stop believing anything that could possibly be false. Well, how do you figure out which beliefs of yours could possibly be false? One of the things that Descartes spots right off the bat, which is an interesting, if fairly obvious fact once you think about it, is that you don't have your beliefs in nice, neat files in your brain the way some people have lots of information stored in nice, neat files on their computers. You don't have a way to call up your beliefs and just sort of produce them and go down through the list and see which ones might possibly be false. So Descartes says, you can't go through these things one at a time. And part of the reason you can't do that, which he doesn't bother to mention, is you don't know what the hell they are. You've got so many beliefs that you're unaware of that it's just a hopeless idea. But what you can do, he thinks, is you can go after something that he calls the basic principles that your beliefs rest on. So he talks in the plural here as if different beliefs might rest on different principles. What it's easier to talk about is beliefs that are based on that arise from different sources. You might think that our senses provide us with some of our beliefs at the moment. Our memories provide us with some. We may have some kind of mathematical intuition. Maybe we have some kind of moral intuition. Right, so the idea would be that for each of these, right, there is a bunch of beliefs that rest on it, that are based on it. And what Descartes is suggesting is, if you go after these sources, or these so-called, what he's calling principles, that underlie all of your beliefs, and you can find something wrong with them, then you're automatically, immediately finding something questionable about all the beliefs that rest on them. If a source of I don't know, it's just I don't know why food is popping into my head. Maybe I do, because there's so much semi-poisoned food out there. But if you've got a source of water or food or whatever it is, and what you discover is that the source itself is infected or has a problem, then you don't want to have much to do with anything that comes out of there. You might get lucky and get stuff that comes out that's okay. You might get stuff that's not okay and get sick as a result. Just that simple idea here, right? That beliefs based on the senses or on the memory or whatever aren't acceptable things to believe if those sources, your senses or your memory, aren't guaranteed to be producing true beliefs. If you can get false beliefs by observation, by your senses or by your memory or by your intuition or whatever, then that puts in question every single belief that rests on them. If your senses sometimes lead you into false beliefs or produce false beliefs, then any belief that comes from the senses is not absolutely guaranteed to be absolutely certain and true. And so you would have to just decide, Descartes would have to decide not to trust any of these things. He's not going to believe anything that isn't guaranteed to be true. Well, what Descartes actually does, in spite of the fact that he briefly suggests that there could be multiple sources of beliefs, is he zeroes in just on the senses, the beliefs that are based on the senses. And the reason for that, he doesn't say so, but pretty clearly the reason for that is that he thinks that the senses are the source of all the beliefs he's interested in, namely the ones that beliefs about what the world is like, scientific beliefs about the nature of reality, okay, or the natural world. So since that's what he's interested in, it's just the sciences. He's not going to be doing theology in here. Oh, actually, he does do some theology. He's not going to be doing mathematics. He's not going to be doing morality. He's going to be talking about science. And he thinks that all of his beliefs in that domain are derived from the senses. So he's going to have a look at the senses. And what he says, and what he does is to produce maybe the shortest argument in the history of philosophy. He says, whatever I have up till now accepted as most true, I have acquired either from the senses or through the senses. But from time to time I have found that the senses deceive, and it is prudent never to trust completely those who have deceived us even once. So there's a little argument. Our senses sometimes deceive us, therefore no belief derived from the senses is to be trusted. To put it just a little bit more briefly than he does. Right? Sometimes we get it wrong. Our senses deceive us about some stuff. So for present purposes that he's engaged in, he can't trust or rely on any belief that he got via the senses, because it might possibly be mistaken. And he's not letting himself trust anything that he might possibly be mistaken about. So, there you have the beginnings of a long argument that he goes through about the senses. The first criticism, which we're going to spend a few minutes on, no more than a few minutes actually, is, look, senses sometimes deceive us, so we can't trust any of these beliefs. Now, the first thing I want to do is this is just a little mental exercise. I have no problem with Descartes saying our senses sometimes deceive us. It's a perfectly respectable thing to say. I know exactly what he means, I think. But the fact is, it's metaphorical. The things that actually deceive are things like you and me, right? Things with a mind. We deceive other beings into believing things, right? Our senses don't literally deceive us. They don't sit around in the morning and say, Johnson's about to wake up. What are we going to pull off this morning? How will we deceive him this morning, right? So it's just an interesting exercise, it turns out, to just say, in a very flat-footed way, our senses sometimes deceive us, without talking about the senses deceiving us. How do you say, literally, without any metaphors, what Descartes is talking about? And he's talking about the most obvious things in the world, okay? You just get it wrong sometimes. You think what you saw was a car of type X, it was actually a car of type Y, okay? You just got it wrong. So how do you say our senses sometimes deceive us without a metaphor? How do you, it's just what Descartes is saying. I mean, how could he have said it without, just flat-footedly? No idea, huh?
Not everything we perceive is proven true, or is the fact.
Well, not every belief we get from the senses is true.
Right.
That's pretty damn good. In fact, it's close to the way I usually wind up putting it. The way I just to tell you what usually comes up from students trying to do this is quite understandable, but it's another metaphor, right? That the idea that we misinterpret the messages that we get from the senses, right? Something like that. Right? So the senses aren't deceiving us; we are misinterpreting the messages they're sending. Right? So to use an example of a sort that we're going to beat to death in a minute here, if somebody sees a mirage, right, their eyes aren't deceiving them, right? Literally deceiving them into believing there's water in the road. what's going on, some people want to say is what's going on is that the eyes are sending us a certain kind of message and we're misinterpreting it, right? That's not a bad start, but the trouble is there's no such message that we're aware of to interpret or misinterpret, right? It's another metaphor. It's got a very central place in cognitive psychology and artificial intelligence and all over the place. So you can use it even though it is a metaphor, but we don't interpret. Well, I mean, sometimes we interpret messages. You know, I get a letter and I can't read the damn handwriting, so I ask somebody, "Can you read this thing?" and can you interpret these squiggle marks for me and tell me what this says? But yeah, I mean, what Descartes has got in mind is simply cases in which we acquire a false belief as a direct result of just looking at the world. We just look out there and we just get it wrong. And that sometimes happens. Right? It's not the rarest thing in the world for somebody to get the facts about the situation wrong, having observed it. So that's, it's vanilla fact. But now, we get to a fairly interesting question, which ties us back, actually, to stuff that we talked about in connection with Hume. Suppose you want to try to prove on some particular occasion that your senses deceived you. That is to say, that you had a false belief about your environment that you got directly as a result of observation. Right? It looks like, I mean, that happens all the time, right? And so the mirage example is the one I'm going to beat to death here for a couple of minutes. You don't say, look, I mean, geez, I thought there was water in the road. Turns out there wasn't. I was wrong. I was deceived. My senses deceived me. Whatever, right? You prove that your senses deceived you, and I'll keep talking that way. I don't mind talking that way at all. It's fine. By just going there and finding out that there's no water, right? But if you actually take this really, really in a nasty, hard way, right? You're going to now give an absolutely knockdown proof that your senses deceived you on a certain occasion, okay? So, and I'm going to use this mirage example. It's your eyes that are at fault, right? So, it's 2 o'clock. Here's what you think, right? That there's water in the road. And at 2:01, you get to the place where you thought you saw water, and it turns out there's no water. Now, you believed this. It turns out that you were wrong. You now believe there's no water in the road. But try putting on the hat of a defense attorney, and you're now going to defend the senses against the charge of having misled you. I mean, we all agree you were wrong. Right? At least initially here, we all agree you were wrong, right, about there being water at this spot. But the defense attorney says, that doesn't mean that my senses are responsible for your mistake. There are other ways to make mistakes besides just your senses malfunctioning somehow or whatever. And I'm not going to let you put my client away unless you can prove to me that there's no other possible explanation of why you thought a minute ago that there was water in the road, and given that you now see that there's no water in the road. So try try stretching. I mean, imagine if you want that the world is physically a little bit weird. Could be. I mean, you could just be wrong about it. I mean, at 2 o'clock you think there's water on the road. You keep driving. At 2:01 you think there's not. Now, what other possible explanation is there other than the fact that you just were deceived by your senses into thinking there was water in the road? Sorry?
The water moved.
The water moved. Yeah, actually, that's a more obvious one than the one. Right. I mean, the water could have just run off somewhere. I mean, you know, you can actually think of a way where that doesn't sound quite that crazy. I mean, there could be a minor little earthquake in the area, right, and a crack opens in the earth and it just goes running off. But the way I've thought of it, a similar thing. It's just in the past, it's just that the water just got absorbed into the ground. That's all. It just happened very fast. I don't know why it would have, but it did. Yeah.
It's really hot, evaporated.
And other possibilities, right, it evaporates. Right, that's another possibility. Yeah.
Could your mind just be playing tricks on you? You wanted to see the water, so you thought you saw it. I mean, you wanted water, so you think you see it. It's not, doesn't
That's interesting. Yeah. So you want to, right? You blame it on your psyche because you know, there's some psychological state because it's affecting how your eyes are. I mean, they're involved, okay, right? But they're being manipulated by your desperate need for water. That's a possibility I'd never even thought of. Yeah.
Someone could have drank it before you.
Somebody drank it before me. Why not? I said, you know, imagine the world's a little different from the way we think it is. Yeah, there are a couple of other wild possibilities. It's hard to describe the situation without, you know, the way I described it, it sort of eliminated these as possible things. But if you imagine now, you really are the defense attorney. It's 2:01, and you're trying to defend the sense of your eyes against the charge that they misled you at 2 o'clock into thinking there was water here. Well, one possibility is that you're not at the place where you thought you saw water, right?
Yes.
you lost track or whatever. You went off and this isn't the place where you thought there was water. It was someplace else. And just one other one that's a possibility. Remember, this is the defense attorney. Anything goes to get the client off the hook. So the defense attorney says, you never thought there was water at 2 o'clock. You're having a brain fart. You're having a memory fart. You think you thought at 2 o'clock there was water in the road, but you didn't, right? It's a bogus memory that's at fault here. Right? So, I mean, the reason for going through that little exercise is that when we talk about proving that something is a fact in the real world, it is always a matter of using other facts, assuming other facts in order to nail down this fact. We're assuming we're at the place where we thought there was water. We're assuming we really did think there was water. We're assuming the water didn't just evaporate, right? We're assuming nobody drank it, etc., right? You have to eliminate all these other things in order to blame the senses for having deceived you about there being water in the road. But all of those other things that you have to assume are the same kinds of things that Descartes not allowing himself to assume. They're all things that could be false. Maybe it did drain in, maybe it did get sucked into the ground, maybe it did evaporate, maybe it did run off to the side, right, etc., etc. Those are all possibilities you can't eliminate. So by the very high standards Descartes is setting himself here, he can't in fact prove that his senses have ever deceived him. In order to prove that his senses deceived him here, he has to assume a lot of the things he's not allowing himself to assume, the kinds of things that might be false. So there's nothing wrong with scientists talking about proving stuff. But when they prove stuff, they're relying on all kinds of other stuff they're just assuming to be true. And Descartes is supposedly in the business now of not letting himself rely on anything that could possibly be false. So, I mean, this is the real place in the first meditation where I don't think Descartes the slightest bit in the dark about this. I think he knows that he's sliding right over this because he wants to get on with other stuff and keep you going with him in this discussion, okay? But there it is, right? He has to assume some things that he knows perfectly well might be false in order to be able to claim that his senses have ever deceived him. Right? Okay, so, oh yeah, just this, I don't even know if this is worth doing, but I'm going to do it. Actually, I think it's worth doing, or I'm going to do it, just to reinforce the point. The reason for this problem, if you think about it in a certain way, is that what Descartes is trying to do is to attack the senses, right? Show they, and it just does it very quickly. They've sometimes deceived us, so they can't be trusted. But in order to do that, in order to prove that our senses have deceived us, what he's doing is using beliefs that themselves he got from the senses. For example, the fact that where he's standing right now, there's no water. Oh, there's another possible explanation, by the way, possible defense of the senses. I say, hey, there's supposed to be water here, there's none here. Well, one possibility is you're standing up to your knees in water and for some reason you just can't feel it or see it. Right? Now your senses malfunction, right? In any case, so you use beliefs that came from the senses to try to prove that the senses were wrong. But if the senses are wrong, then the beliefs can't be trusted, right? And so you get into this vicious kind of circle. And that's just the nature of our knowledge about the world. It's all interlocking stuff, and you can't pick out one little thing, all right, and say the senses got it wrong here without relying on other parts of your system of beliefs. Okay, so having gotten clear to his own satisfaction that the senses have deceived him, the idea is not to rely on anything that the senses tell him. Now, what happens for the rest of this first meditation, for most of it, is that Descartes goes through a series of arguments back and forth. He's just presented an argument. I'm going to now see why I'm doing this in a minute. So we've still got this picture of the beliefs that rest on our senses. And Descartes thinks he's just shown that the senses sometimes deceive us, so we can't trust any of these beliefs. But now Descartes responds to his own argument. And he says, come on, we sometimes get things wrong. The shape of a building that's far away, or something we're looking at that's not under very good lighting conditions or whatever. Sure, our senses aren't perfect. And we occasionally get things wrong under unfavorable conditions. But it would be ridiculous, just because I realize my senses sometimes get things wrong, to think, for example, that I'm sitting in front of the fireplace with my bathrobe on, which is something I also got from my senses, right? To think that belief is not to be trusted would just be silly. So what he does, in effect, is say, look, I'll grant you, right, that some of my beliefs that come from the senses are not to be trusted. But that's no reason not to trust my senses in general. That would just be silly. At which point, Descartes attacks himself, right? A brilliant piece of reasoning. As if I were not a man who sleeps at night and regularly has all the same experiences while asleep as madmen do when they're awake. Indeed, sometimes even more improbable ones. How often asleep at night am I convinced of just such familiar events, that I'm here in my dressing gown sitting by the fire, when in fact I'm lying undressed in bed. Now, you may or may not have vivid dreams. I'm prepared to grant Descartes that he had very vivid dreams. What he's now bringing up is a second argument about why the senses aren't to be trusted. And this is, there's a transition that happens here that just is worth noticing. But let me just make clear what Descartes' doing. He's producing, this may be, Descartes has got two famous arguments. This one you can actually see in the philosophical literature just described sometimes as dream in capital letters. I mean, everybody knows about Descartes' dream argument. What Descartes is doing is bringing out now a second complaint about the senses, which is supposed to mean he can't trust any of his beliefs, okay? The first one was just the fact that they sometimes deceive us. And he said, okay, well, yeah, fine, but that doesn't do much damage. Most of my beliefs, it would be crazy to not trust them. So here comes the second argument to try to blow them all away, right? Look, I can dream anything. I can dream that I'm sitting here by the fire. I can dream that I'm swimming, the English Channel, whatever. And my dreams are so vivid, right, that in fact I can't distinguish sometimes my dreams from reality. So there, not all the time maybe, but sometimes. So there's a possibility I'm just having a vivid dream right now. And at any given moment of my life, it may be that I'm not in the situation I think I'm in. I'm vividly dreaming that I'm in that situation. So for any belief that I might have right now, that I'm getting from my senses about what my environment is, it could be mistaken because I could be asleep and dreaming. So once again, the idea is off go all of his beliefs. Now, the claim here is just simply that some dreams at least are vivid enough, they're indistinguishable from reality, and any belief I might have about my present, the world at the moment, is one that I therefore might be mistaken about because I might be having a vivid dream. Right? Therefore, off go all of my beliefs about the way the world is. Descartes actually, in this argument, the way I read him, he actually has two arguments here. I haven't found a single scholar of Descartes yet that I've been able to convince of this, but so much the worse for the scholars. This thing I just described to you, right, or just read to you, Descartes just talking about actual dreams, right? The kinds of dreams we all have. We're all normal people. We know what dreams are. You have dreams when you're asleep. And he's making fun of himself. Oh yeah, brilliant, Descartes, as if you haven't dreamt that you were in front of the fireplace. And just as vividly as you think you're seeing the fireplace right now. That's what I think of as just sort of the common sense of, I don't know why this term is in my head tonight, flat-footed, nothing fancy or philosophical about it, just a simple reaction. Look, how do you know you're not dreaming? It's an important argument because Descartes wants to claim that we can have dreams we can't distinguish from reality. But then he goes on and does something else. I mean, it starts a new paragraph, actually. And, well, yeah, what I want to point out, sorry, didn't emphasize what I want to emphasize here. He actually puts it in here. How often asleep at night am I convinced of events like this, that I'm sitting in front of the fireplace, when in fact I'm lying undressed in bed. Right? So this is just a simple, factual report about his own history. He's had dreams, vivid dreams about being in front of the fireplace when actually he was undressed in bed. And now, I guess we all know that Descartes didn't wear pajamas. But now he goes on and does something very different. He actually takes the idea of a dream and he stretches it way beyond the idea of an ordinary dream that you have when you're asleep in bed or in the car or in your Barco lounger or wherever you like to sleep. And he says this: suppose then that I'm dreaming and that these particulars, that my eyes are open, that I'm moving my head and stretching out my hands, are not true. Suppose, this is the way this ought to read. Suppose, in fact, that I don't even have such hands or such a body at all. Right? Now, this is a different picture, right? He's dreaming, but he's a disembodied being. He doesn't have a physical body, right? That's very different from just pointing out the obvious fact that he sometimes has dreams when he's asleep in bed. Now he's imagining an exotic situation. He describes it as dreaming, right? Let's suppose that I'm dreaming, but let's also suppose that I don't even have a body. So, in any case, sorry. Yeah, this is interesting. Okay. we're back on track. So we now get this more elaborate dream scenario. And Descartes, once again, thinks he has an argument which raises questions about all of his beliefs that are based on the senses. Yeah. This time I do need to interrupt. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I need a little help for you to make the dream argument a little bit more tangible. I kind of got it, but it's still.
He's just imagining that he's not awake. He thinks right now he can see the fireplace, he can see his bathrobe, but then he says, "Wait a minute! Sometimes you're just dreaming when it looks like this. So how do you know you're not dreaming?" That's all there is to it. Just the possibility that he's dreaming, so that all of his beliefs about his environment are false. Right? He's in fact upstairs in bed, sleeping. Okay, so what I wanted to point out about, and I stifled myself a few minutes ago, there's a shift that's going on here in Descartes that's just worth noticing. He started out by attacking his senses. His senses deceived him, right? Now, he's no longer attacking his senses. If he's dreaming, then his senses are shut down. Right? They don't have anything to do with what the hell's going on. So you can't blame it on the senses. Right? So it's just worth noticing, right, that what Descartes is after is these beliefs. Right? He's trying to show that they are all questionable. And so what these beliefs really are beliefs that come from the senses or appear to come from the senses. Right? They seem to come from the senses, but they may not. But it's so, think of these now as beliefs that seem to come from the senses. Instead of ones that actually do. I mean, it's still the same body of beliefs, right? What Descartes thinks is that he can dream anything that he can perceive, right? So it's the same bunch of beliefs, but he's not actually attacking the senses now. What he's attacking is the reliability of these beliefs. One possibility, the original possibility, was the senses just have got it wrong. The second one is they're not even coming from the senses. They're coming from inside my head. They have nothing to do with reality, right? And if so, then they're not to be trusted. And so once again, he thinks that all of these are wiped out, that you can't trust any of them. But now he jumps back on the other side of the fence. And he says this. Now he's defending of some of these beliefs. Nonetheless, it must surely be admitted that the visions that come in sleep are like paintings, which must have been fashioned in the likeness of things that are real. And hence that at least these general kinds of things are things that are not imaginary but real. Eyes, head, hands, and the body as a whole. Okay? So here's the idea. Even if I am in fact asleep, I'm dreaming. Strike the word asleep. Even if I am dreaming, and I don't even have a body, right? Still, I'm going to just take these words out of here. Descartes saying, even if that's true, that I don't have a body at all. Still, there are some beliefs in this broad category about the world out there that seem to come from my senses that have to be true. there must be bathrobes and fireplaces and heads and hands and arms and all this stuff, because I couldn't dream about those things if I'd never bumped into them. You know, I can't dream about a certain kind of object if I've never had that experience. Things that appear in my dreams are things that are, they're images of things that I've encountered somewhere else. So now Descartes is admitting that a whole load of his beliefs about the world may be mistaken, right? But there are some of them that survive. Namely, that there exist objects, and actually that he's run into them at some point, of the various sorts that he's capable of dreaming about. Right? Okay, back on the attack. Descartes says, now wait a minute. We've all got imaginations, and we can imagine stuff that we've never seen. So I don't see why there have to be or that I have to seen bathrobes or fireplaces or whatever. These could basically be the products of my imagination. And he talks about painters, right? Painters can paint stuff they've never seen. So why can't I dream stuff that I've never seen, right? So, Descartes says, okay, right? Maybe there don't have to be any of those things out there. Maybe I can imagine them. Not closing it all the way yet, because now Descartes says, well, now wait a minute. You can imagine a lot of stuff in the way painters imagine stuff they've never seen. But notice that a painter, if he's going to paint stuff that he's never seen, has got to have some paint, right? And your imagination may be very good, and it may be able to cook up a lot of stuff that you've never seen or encountered. But it's got to have some raw materials to work with. Right? The imagination, you must have encountered things that have color, for example. Right? If your mind didn't already have the idea of color, then it couldn't imagine colored objects of various sorts. And it must have the idea of things that occupy space. And he doesn't go on, but you could. I mean, the one that occurs to me that you might want in there is that you've got to have the idea of texture. So some things are smooth and some things are rough. You can't dream up smoothness and roughness and color and shape out of nowhere, right? Your mind isn't the kind of thing that can just create this out of nothing. So there have got to be a few beliefs of yours about the world that are still true, that basically come from your senses. Namely, that there are rough things out there, there are colored things, there are things that occupy space. Maybe you're the one that came up with the idea of a bathrobe or the idea of a fireplace. Maybe your imagination did that. But it had to have run into things that had color and shape and texture in order to do that. So there's a very few beliefs, finally, that are left at the beginning of this back and forth that Descartes goes through. Some beliefs about the world that ultimately that seem to come from the senses, that must be true. There must be such things, right? Because otherwise these other ways of explaining why you're having the images you do won't work, right? Your imagination can't produce it. So, at this point there's a bit of a digression in Descartes. He talks about the differences between sciences. He thinks mathematics and geometry are special because they just deal with stuff that focuses just on simple properties like shape, okay, and quantity. And they don't have to do with color and smells and tastes and all that stuff that the other science. But that's a digression, okay? But then Descartes starts zeroing in on his big bomb that he's famous for. But he goes through some stuff that a lot of philosophers don't pay much attention to when they're expounding Descartes, and it's worth noticing what he does. Let me just read you a few sentences here. And yet, firmly rooted in my mind is the long-standing opinion that there is an omnipotent God who made me the kind of creature that I am. How do I know that he has not brought it about that there is no earth, no sky, no extended thing, no shape, no size, no place? In other words, no universe at all. While at the same time ensuring that all these things appear to me to exist just as they do now. So he'd gotten it down to this place where he thought at least a few things had to be true about the universe, that there were things with these basic properties of shape and size and whatever. But now he says, wait a minute, I've always believed that God existed, and he could certainly deceive me if he wanted to. So how do I know that he's not? How do I know this isn't just, he's just filling my head with imagery of stuff that has shape and size and color and whatever, right? When in fact there aren't any of those things. This is a rhetorical question in a way, right? But it's important. I'm not going to get into the details of why it's important. But he just asked this question: how do I know that he's not doing this? Now I'm just having a little fight with myself about whether to skip over something here, which I love to talk about, but it may, but this may not be a time when I will. Actually, what he talks about is this is kind of neat. He says, there are some people that can't really handle the idea that God might do that. They'd rather not have the idea of God at all, or they'd rather think there is no God at all, rather than think that God might deceive them. And Descartes says, I don't really know what to say to those people. But here's a point that they need to understand. If there is no God, then they weren't created by God. And if they weren't created by God, then they came from some inferior kind of source, something a lot less perfect than God. Human beings came from somewhere, and if they didn't come from God, then they came from something less perfect than God. And if what they came from is less perfect than God, then the chances that they're all screwed up about what the world is like is even greater, right? The chances are even better that they're all screwed up than the chances that God has screwed up their heads, right? So you can't get out of worrying about whether you're all screwed up about reality by imagining that you came from someplace other than God, because that just means there's an even better chance that you're screwed up. So it's just kind of a sidebar. I'm glad I decided to throw it in. I hope you are too. What Descartes finally decides to do is this. And he puts a reminder in here for everybody of what he's doing. And I'm going to emphasize it because I'm one of about the 3 philosophers on the planet who emphasizes this. It's very much worth emphasizing about Descartes. Descartes says, look, these beliefs of mine that I've raised all these questions about, including these, by the way, Descartes himself has just asked this question, which he doesn't see. I don't see how I can prove that God's not deceiving me. So as far as I can see, all of these, all my beliefs are ones I could be wrong about, because how do I know God's not deceiving? Now, what does this mean for Descartes' project? It means that he can't rely on any belief of his that seems to come from the senses, because any such belief of his might be one about which God is deceiving him. So for his project, remember now, he is hoping to find stuff in the end that's absolutely certain and indubitable, couldn't possibly be mistaken about. from which to start over again, right? Either firm and lasting foundation in the sciences, something stable and likely to last. So you can't use any of these. But then he says, it's one thing for me to have gone through these arguments and shown that there's some possibility, it may be a remote possibility, but there's some possibility that I'm wrong about them all, and so I can't trust them. So I'm going to have to proceed in my project somehow, doing something else. But while I'm proceeding in this project and trying not to rely on these, I've got a problem. Namely, that these beliefs of mine, maybe they might be false. I've just shown that. But that's a kind of a weird possibility. Right? It is a real possibility. God might be deceiving him. But it's this kind of exotic possibility. And the fact is that these beliefs, he says, and I will quote the words, right? These beliefs of mine are highly probable opinions. Opinions which, despite the fact that they are in a sense doubtful, it is still much more reasonable to believe than to deny. So he's saying these two things about his beliefs. Most of my beliefs are perfectly reasonable, and I'm not suggesting that I should disbelieve them, right? They're more reasonable to believe than deny. They're more probable than not. What I've shown is not that they're probably false. Not at all. All I've shown is that it's possible that they're wrong. And for my project, I can't rely on beliefs like that. So I can't let myself rely on these. The only reason he thinks he can't rely on them is because of the bare possibility that they might be wrong. So he says, because they're so natural and probable and reasonable, you know, I'm in danger of falling into them and sort of relying on them, no matter how hard I try not to. And I can't do that in this project where I'm trying to isolate some absolutely certain beliefs. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to imagine. That probably isn't the word in the translation. He says, I will suppose. Right? He's going to suppose something, and this is the second most famous thing about, or one of maybe equally famous thing of Descartes' first meditation. He's going to suppose, for the sake of carrying out his project, not that God is deceiving him, but that there is something which is famously now called the evil demon. Being with godlike powers, but a kind of perverted being who gets its kicks out of just deceiving Descartes. That's just sort of what it's all about, or it's one of the things that it's about. It just plays with Descartes' mind. And so it has arranged, in fact, that there is no universe. Descartes doesn't have a body. There is no physical universe at all. He's going to suppose that there are just these two things. There's an evil demon deceiving me about as much as he can possibly deceive me about, and there's me, with the me just being a disembodied mind. I don't have a body at all. So I'm going to imagine that there's a demon deceiving me about everything that an omnipotent being could possibly deceive me about. And with that in mind, I'm going to proceed and see whether I can find any beliefs at all anywhere about which I couldn't possibly be mistaken, and that can be the basis for my new science. Okay? That's a weird coincidence. It's exactly time to let you go, and that's the place to let you go. So we will talk about Descartes next time. We're going to move on pretty quickly to the problem of free will.
Is he going to try and reason it out later on? Because it does seem that at most times people seem to plea insanity and blame God or something that they can't actually explain. Like God, okay, they're blaming God entirely, something that they can't. Okay, God made me do it. Okay, the devil made me do it. And this argument where he says that since everything that he's come into contact from some way or another, he is dreaming about it. How is he dreaming about God? if he's not.
Yeah, well, how does he know he's not dreaming that God exists?
Yeah,